The grades are in for the New York Giants draft class and overall roster rebuild of the 2024 offseason. We'll tell you if the Giants get a shiny new apple or do they get detention. Coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it's a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on the classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store and on Google Play. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm Patricia Traynor, your host, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for Giants Country over on the Fan Nation Network, si.com/NFL/Giants. And welcome on into my Blue Crew community members, my newcomers, my everydayers, and everybody in between. Thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And please, if you watch on YouTube, please subscribe, like the video, click that little notification bell. All that helps us tremendously. And on today's Locked On Giants podcast, Professor Ed Valentine is with me today as we go over what the New York Giants did in the 2024 draft. And we're going to do some grades. We're going to take a look at, each pick. We're going to take a look at, the overall approach taken. And did the Giants get better, or are there still concerns on this roster? So that's today's agenda. Professor Valentine, welcome on in.
Oh, thank you for having me, Patty. I didn't know I would have I would have dressed up. I would have, gotten myself a nice hat. I would have looked the part a little better had I known.
You got to be prepared, man. How many times do I got to tell you? Always be prepared.
What can I tell you?
I tried, folks. I tried teaching him stuff, but
I don't know, man.
At some point,
how's that look? That doesn't help, does it? No, we're not gonna go there.
We'll just have to go with your face as is. No hiding it behind a hat. But anyway, Ed, the Giants draft picks are in, 6 picks. Let's start off with your overall impression of this class and what Joe Schoen did.
It's a good class, Patty. It's I don't have a big problem with any of the picks. It's one of those deals where I say it all the time. You might have had, you can argue that there are things they didn't do, things they didn't get done. They didn't address the offensive line. They didn't add a defensive lineman. I would have thought they would add to at least one of those positions. I think I saw someone on X earlier today say that the Giants were the only team in the draft that didn't add at least one player on either side of the ball, on either line. But you can't do everything you'd like to do. I do like the picks that they made, but I think as they go forward into 2024 and beyond, I think we know what the questions are. And we know what the big questions are coming out of this draft. But that said, the individual players that they picked, I don't really have a big problem with any of the guys that they brought in.
All right. Now, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but I want to ask your opinion about what didn't happen at quarterback. So everybody and their uncle knew that the Giants did due diligence. They called New England to see what it would cost to move up, because they had Drake May in their sights. But then afterwards, when realizing that New England really never had any intention of moving out of that 3rd spot, the Giants are like, well, we said that it's going to be Daniel Jones and he's under contract. And, for now, that's what we're going. So I guess my question here is are you convinced that they're convinced that Daniel Jones is the answer moving forward? Or how did you just take that whole, response by Joe Schoen and just how everything went down regarding the quarterback spot?
Patty, I'm not convinced at all that they think he's the long-term answer, that he's the guy beyond 2024. When you and I did a show before the draft, I remember talking about the Jones topic. And the thing that I went back to was before the draft, all the times he was asked about Jones throughout the offseason, he always said, I have faith in Jones. I have confidence in Jones as our starter in 2024. It wasn't until after the draft that he said, well, he's under contract for the next 3 years. And he basically, that wasn't a ringing endorsement. He basically said, we'll go forward with what we have, because what choice did they have? But everything, Patty, we can talk individually about the Malik Nabers selection at 6. And I know you and I had said last week that we were both Rome Odunze fans. And I get it. I get Malik Nabers. I kind of expected Nabers instead of Odunze. I had this feeling that they would love Nabers' skill set more than they might love Odunze's for a Dable type offense. But everything comes through the prism of whether or not Daniel Jones can give them decent quarterback play, good enough quarterback play in 2024, and comes through the prism of, are they right back here again next year trying to figure out who their quarterback is in 2025?
Yeah. I mean, I give them credit because they didn't reach for a quarterback after Drake May came off the board. Some teams might have reached in a panic move. Joe Shane held his water on the position, and he went with Malik Nabers at 6. Now, Ed, I think you heard this. If you didn't, the Giants did receive one offer to trade down, and I believe that was with the Colts. And they could have had themselves a nice little package, from what I understand. That being said, are you disappointed that they didn't trade down, or do you think Shane was right to stay put, not get cute, and just take the receiver, which this offense really needed?
Patty, I'm fine with staying right there and taking Malik Nabers. I would have been fine with taking Rome Odunze as well. I think that we talk about this all the time. You can make a good argument for trading down, and I could have understood trading down, and you might have been able to get a starting cornerback if you traded down. You might have been able to do some other things, but this team had no difference makers on offense, no real difference makers on offense. I mean, Darius Slayton's a nice player. Wan'Dale Robinson is a nice player. Devin Singletary is a nice player, but there isn't a single player on that offense, or wasn't until Malik Nabers was drafted, that a defensive coordinator would look at and say, oh my God, we have to give this guy extra attention. We have to plan for this guy. We have to slide our coverage to this guy. We have to load up the box to deal with this running back. And I've said for years, the Giants have needed game changers. And at some point, when you've got one in your grasp, you've got to take that guy. So I had no problem with staying put.
Yeah, I didn't either. I mean, he didn't get cute, didn't trade at all, which I think is the first time since he's been GM that he didn't make any kind of trades. But then again, you only had 6 picks. So, trading away the pick to get Brian Burns basically was the only trade really he could make at that point. So, Ed, before we get into the individual grades, which we'll do in the next segment, I want to get an overall assessment from you. Do you feel that the Giants roster is a lot better, a little better? Are there holes that still concern you? Where do you see the roster right now based on the personnel that they brought in?
It's better, Patty. It's better because you added Brian Burns in that big trade. It's better because you added Malik Nabers. It's better because you brought in a couple of, at least, I guess the right word is quality, veteran, dependable offensive linemen. They didn't add anything in the draft, which I think they added 5 offensive linemen in free agency. So maybe we shouldn't have expected them to add there, but the roster is better, but there are still questions. There's still questions in the secondary. There are still questions about the defensive line depth. But I keep coming back to it. You just can't fix every problem, or you can't address every supposed hole in one off season. You know, at some point you pick your priorities, you pick your poison, you do the best that you can. So I feel better about the roster. But the other thing that I will say, Patty, is, you know, people, I've already got questions for my upcoming mailbag sent in about, did the Giants close the gap on the Cowboys and the Eagles? Well, the Eagles just had a really good draft, and the Cowboys had a really good draft. And if you didn't notice, the Washington Commanders crushed the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft. So everyone in the NFC East got better. So the fact that the Giants just got better, is that going to translate to more victories? Maybe, but maybe not, because you can argue that everybody else in the division also got better.
Yeah, and it's going to be a very tight competition in the division. I think the Eagles, you know, out of the 4 teams, the Eagles by far had the best draft.
How does Howie Roseman sit there and do nothing and have the number 1 rated cornerback in the draft, which is his primary need, fall to him in the 20s, and then engineer a trade in the 2nd round for a cornerback / safety that everybody was basically drooling over at that point? How does he do that?
He's a magician. Works wonders with the salary cap. I mean, he's a magician. He really is.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Puts on a master class every offseason of how to build a roster. And for what it's worth, even though it looks good on paper, 9 times out of 10, it looks just as good on the field. So it is a master class. And speaking of class, Ed, when we come back from break, grab your red pen, because we're going to start grading these picks one by one made by the Giants. Don't go anywhere, everybody. Hey, Giant fans, we've all been there, either as a player or as a fan. It's halftime and the scoreboard is not looking good. You're feeling low and you're not sure if your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep, lift your head up, and say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right, the smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone, anytime, with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress with your buddies. And there's so much to do. You can play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards, make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball, and even charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put your game face on, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or on Google Play. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traynor, with Ed Valentine, a big blue view, and school is in session. Edward, you ready to do some grading?
I guess so, Patty. I guess so. Like I said, I didn't come prepared, you know, with my chalkboard and my cap and all that, but I'll do the best I can.
Do I have to put you in jail?
No. But you know, I'll be fine, Patty. I'll be fine.
Well, here's how it's going to work. We're going to go down the list of the 6 draft picks. We're going to talk about what we like, what we don't like about the pick. And then, yeah, I know it's premature to give a grade because these guys haven't played it down yet, but we'll try a grade anyway, whether it be based on a need or how the guy fits in or so on and so forth. So without any further ado, Ed, Malik Nabers, round 1.
Oh, Patty, as we talked about earlier, this grade has to be looked at in the vein of what kind of quarterback play the Giants get. And it also has to be looked at long term for me in when it has to be compared against the kind of player that JJ McCarthy becomes, because he was the guy that everybody thought if the Giants were going to go quarterback at 6, he would have been the guy. And it's one of the reasons I was asking Joe Shane, would you have regret about passing on a guy who became a great quarterback? And on its face, you have to give the Malik Nabers pick. Just when you look at the player, when you look at the talent, when you look at what he can do for the offense, it's an A. But there's always that it almost comes back to the Barkley argument from a few years ago. It's not, apples to apples, but you've got to have the quarterback. If Daniel Jones plays like 2022 Daniel Jones, everything's fine. If he plays like 2023 Daniel Jones or Joe Judge era Daniel Jones, and they're back in the quarterback market next year still trying to figure this out, then you're still going to be asking yourself if the Giants did the right thing when they had an opportunity to answer that question in this draft. Like I said, on its face, Nabers is a terrific player. Nothing wrong with that pick at all. Not his fault that everybody, and you read every draft grade that you read, every draft analyst said, that you read says, but did they do the right thing about quarterback? And we don't know the answer to that yet. We'll have to find out. But on its face, Malik Nabers is the best wide receiver that they've had since that other guy whose name I can't remember that came out of LSU.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, on the surface, very good pick. The Giants haven't had a number one receiver since 2018. That guy whose name I can't remember his name either, but 1,000-yard receiver that year, very dynamic, very electric. But you're right. It's who's going to throw the ball to him, and is the person throwing the ball to him going to be able to get it to him and give him opportunities and stuff. Now, just to add to your assessment, and by the way, I give it an A grade, the pick. What Malik Nabers can do in his own right to help the offense is he can create headaches for opposing defensive coordinators. So they're going to sit up at night and they're going to say, my God, what do we do about this guy? Because Nabers can be a chess piece that they can move around. And he's probably going to draw a lot of double coverage, I would think. So that being said, with him drawing double coverage, now maybe that opens things up for others. So that's what I'm looking for. I have a little visitor here. That's what I'm looking for. My new dog, by the way.
Yes.
What I'm looking for in
Not
terms
an
of
alien.
what Malik Nabers brings. So, all right. Pick number 2, round 2, safety, Tyler Nubin, Minnesota.
Really interesting pick here for me, Patty. I did mock draft after mock draft after mock draft before the draft. Tyler Nubin was always within range at 47, and being the top-notch, bright, talented professor that I am, I don't think I ever once picked Tyler Nubin at 47 for the Giants. So shows you what I know. All right. But
So you get an F.
Yeah, I get an F. But for me, I guess when I looked at Joe Shane and I thought about positional value and the way that Joe tends to think about that, I didn't think he would go safety at 47, but it makes a ton of sense. Not only did the Giants lose Xavier McKinney in free agency this offseason, Patty, they lost Julian Love in free agency a year ago. So that's 2 starting safeties in 2 years. Nubin, for me, there were more athletic guys. All right, more athletic guys, but this told you a lot about how Shane Bowen's going to play defense, about the kind of players that he wants. It's going to be a zone heavy defense, not going to expose guys in man-to-man coverage as much as possible. I found it really, really interesting that over the weekend when Joe Shane was talking about building a defense full of young core players that are under contract for the next several years, I found it really interesting that he included Tyler Nubin in that core. So that tells you what he's expecting of Tyler Nubin. I think I'm going to give this one a B plus. The only thing I'm worried about a little bit is I'm a little bit worried about the athleticism. I'm a little bit worried about you can't sit in zone 100% of the time. There are times when you're going to be forced to play some man coverage, and I guess that's a little bit, what I worry about there.
I like the pick. I'll give it an A. And the reason why I'm going to give it an A is they have a safety now who is a playmaker, a guy who I think he led his college program in interceptions. Now, I realize that just because you did it in college doesn't mean you're going to do it moving forward. In the NFL, it's a little harder, obviously. But, that's the one thing I think the Giants really didn't get a whole lot of from their safeties last year is the big plays, the game-changing plays. So I think this young man, Tyler Nubin, has that ability to do it. Again, I don't expect him to set team records or season records in that category, but that's very appealing, as is the fact, like you said, he seems to fit what Shane Bowen wants to do as far as the type of defense that he wants to run. And I share your concern. Can he be, effective in man coverage? Because, like you said, they're not going to be in man coverage all the time.
The other
So
thing that I found interesting that Joe said was that he was a culture changer at
mhm.
Minnesota, and the Giants have tried to collect that kind of player. They want that kind of player. They want character guys. So I found that interesting as well.
Ed, pick number 3, round 3. This one, this would be Andrew Phillips, Kentucky. And let me go first on this one because out of all the picks, this one I was like very meh on this one. Not because I don't think this kid is talented, not because, I don't think he can fit in, but listening to Joe Shane talk about how, he's probably going to start in the slot and he's going to have the flex outs, be able to flex outside, much like Cordell Flott. And right away, it's interesting when he said that, I thought, oh my gosh, they just picked another Cordell Flott type of situation. Why? When they have cornerback 2, and you look at Phillips and you say to yourself, well, if the slot's his best position, now what do they do about cornerback 2? So this pick, for those reasons, I was, like I said, I was meh on it. So what did you think?
I tend to agree with you, Patty. I think that, like the player, okay, I like the player. I'm not sure that I understand the fit. I'm not sure that I understand the reason, because basically, as you said, they basically drafted Cordell Flott again. Okay. I think we all knew that they would address cornerback. I think we all knew they had to address cornerback at some point. I thought they would go with someone like Cam Hart or someone like TJ Tampa or someone like Kyrie Jackson, someone who was a pure outside corner. Okay. Because what they really have done here is they basically have Cordell Flott and Andrew Phillips, who are inside outside guys who are both better in the slot because of their size. So somebody's going to be playing, unless they sign a veteran free agent, one of those guys is going to be playing at a position that's probably not where they're best suited to play. Or one of those guys is not going to be playing a whole lot of snaps. And so this one, I like the player. I like the toughness. I like the competitiveness. The couple people that I've been able to talk to a little bit about Phillips so far love the competitive nature of the kid. Uh, I love all of that. I just thought that this was a strange choice for corner simply because as you indicated, it duplicated a skill set that's already there while they're still missing that true outside corner.
Unless they feel that they have that outside corner. But then again, I go back to the free agency period where they tried to sign 2 veterans at
Mhm.
that spot and fell short in that quest. So
I mean,
I
maybe Nick
question
maybe Nick McLeod can play that spot, but
maybe.
maybe,
I'd hate
but
to
that's
lose
a
them on special
question.
teams, though.
Yeah, and I'd probably give that pick a B overall, Patty, just because I like the player. I'm just not sure that I really think that the fit was the right one.
I'd give it a C plus. I like the
Yeah,
player. I don't like the fit.
yeah,
But what do
yeah.
I know? We just call what we see.
Maybe I'm an easy grader.
You must be. I tell you, I wish I had had more teachers like you. I would have been, top of my class graduating.
I needed more teachers like me, Patty.
All right. We're going to do picks 4, 5, and 6 right after this. Don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, it's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. And as a New York Rangers fan, I'm really liking the odds of them going deep into this year's Stanley Cup playoffs. And speaking of odds, there's no better time than now to get involved with all the action sports has to offer. Right now, when you sign up for a new account with FanDuel, you will get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to hat tricks to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit fanduel.com/lockedon today and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, everybody, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm Patricia Trainer with Ed Valentine of Big Blue View, and we are grading the Giants 2024 draft picks. So we've done rounds 1 through 3. We are now up to round 4. Theo Johnson, tight end, Penn State. And before you jump in, for those who don't know, Darren Waller still has not made up his mind regarding what he's going to do. I think he's going to retire. I think all the signs are pointing to him retiring. But here's where I guess I was a little surprised. I knew tight end was a need, but I had wondered if maybe the Giants, by taking a #1 receiver, as they did in the first round with Malik Nabers, if that might lessen the need for a tight end just a little bit, and maybe the Giants go with interior defensive line or maybe even offensive line at that spot. So I don't hate the pick. I mean, the production in college isn't great, but the potential's there. So Ed, what did you think of that pick?
Oh, it's another interesting one, Patty. You make a couple of good points, and what I'll say about Darren Waller quickly before I even get into Theo Johnson is it's the end of April. Free agency's come and gone. The draft has come and gone. Darren Waller still hasn't quote unquote made a decision. He says, or he's told media recently, that he's still working out at a sufficient level to be able to play if he wants to play. But if he hasn't been able to make a decision at this point, Patty, then to me, his heart's not in it. His heart's just not in it. And, and you just wonder about that. So like everybody else, I would expect him to retire at this point. And I think the Theo Johnson selection, signing 2 tight ends in free agency, tells you that they think so as well. This is another pick, Patty. I basically wrote at Big Blue View where we're talking about grades, and I should probably get the dunce cap for not connecting Theo Johnson to the Giants. When you think about um, the fact that Shea Tierney was his offensive coordinator at the Senior Bowl, when you think about the fact that he was classmates at Penn State with Christian Daboll, Brian Daboll's son, who is now on the Giants coaching staff. So when you think about the fact that how often has Joe Shane talked about wanting to draft guys that they really get to know, wanting to draft guys that they have, that they're excuse me, that they have a lot of contact with, and all of those things. So I probably should have connected Theo Johnson to the Giants as a tight end possibility. So, but that's demerits for me. That's the dunce cap for me. The pick itself, I like the pick. I do want to say something about day 3 picks quickly. I see people at Big Blue View all the time. Oh, that 4th round pick or that 5th round pick or that 6th round pick, he's a bust. There's never been a 4th or 5th or 6th or 7th round pick that's a bust. Sorry. Those guys are all flyers. Those guys, if you're being picked on day 3 of the draft, then it's 50-50 whether you're going to be a really, truly productive player in the NFL. Those guys aren't busts. If those guys turn out to outplay their draft slot, then that's a home run. Those guys don't bust because they're imperfect players to begin with, and the expectations aren't the same as a 1st or 2nd round pick. So I just hate it when people say, "Oh, that 5th round pick was a bust."
Yeah.
That's nonsense. I'm going to give Theo Johnson a C plus. I think there's a lot of good that you see on tape, Patty. There's just not a lot of college production. I think, this guy could be a really good player, but again, 4th round pick without a ton of production. C plus, B minus, somewhere in there for me. Again, I thought maybe that maybe this would be a spot where the Giants went running back or offensive line or something like that. But I understand it. And if you're going to take a tight end, for me, I like this because it's not a pure blocker. It's not a pure it's not a pure, receiving tight end or a move tight end. This is a guy who, if he develops, can be an inline guy who can do both. So, but the only thing that bothers me a little bit is the lack of college production. So we'll see where that goes. But again, no real problem with this pick for me. But I don't know why I flash back to Adrian Robinson when the Giants drafted him a few years ago as the big, the JPP of tight ends who didn't have a whole lot of college production and was supposed to be the next big thing as a tight end. And that just never happened. But, fingers crossed. Hopefully Theo Johnson has a better career than Adrian Robinson.
But we won't call him a bust, obviously. So
no, we won't.
All right. Pick 5th round pick. Now this pick, I got to tell you, I think this one was one of the most underrated picks in this class. Running back Tyrone Tracy Jr. from Purdue. And I like this pick, not just because of what he brings to the offense, but kick returner. That to me caught my eye. And I said to myself, my gosh, that's a really, really good value pick right there.
Well, for me, 5th round pick. Now, look, I'm not expecting this guy to be an all pro and all of that. But for what you're looking for in the 5th round, you're looking for somebody with a skill or a trait or something that just jumps out at you. And for me, the kick return and the idea that Tyrone Tracy was so successful in his first year ever playing running back. You go and watch some of his film, go and watch some of his clips. The way that he's able to navigate the trash and the way that he's able to find holes and the way that he's able to bounce off tackles. It's hard to believe that this is a guy who until 2023 had never played running back before. Plus as you said, the fact that he was a highly successful kickoff returner at Purdue. I think he averaged more than 25 yards a return last year for Purdue. For me, for what you're looking for at that point in the group, that's an A. That's an A, because that's a guy with a skill set that leaps off the table at you, right? So, we'll see how that pans out. But the only thing that you read about Tracy that bothers you a little bit is some ball security issues, and maybe that comes from inexperience as a back. But I love the way that the guy navigates and find holes and feels like just looks like a natural running back. I mean, if he's Cordero Patterson, that's not a bad thing.
No, it's not. And I like the fact also that he doesn't have a lot of tread on his tires.
Exactly.
Despite being a super senior, of having that extra year of eligibility.
He's going to be an old man at the age of 25, Patty. He's going to shuffle into the locker room with his.
Not quite as old as you and I.
No.
Not quite as old as you, since you're older than I am.
We had to do that, didn't we, Patty?
You set it up and I spiked it home, man.
Yes, I did. I set it up. All right.
All right. We got one more pick to do, Ed. And then one more pick. All right. 6th round pick, Darius. I think this is how you say it. Muasau, linebacker, UCLA, known as a tackling machine. That one I gotta admit, I thought that was a little bit of a surprise at first. But when I thought about it, it's like, okay, the Giants have obviously Bobby Okereke, who's, going to be here for a while. Michael McFadden's not that bad, but, I wonder if they don't want to maybe upgrade from him. They re-signed Isaiah Simmons, who's more of a sub-package type guy. And then you've got Darian Beavers, who really, let's see what he brings after being basically away from the game for 2 years. He was on the practice squad last year as he recovered from that knee injury. I would have liked for them to have gone outside linebacker at this spot, because to me, you can never have too many outside linebackers. And, given Azeez Ojulari's injury history. But obviously they felt the better value was at inside linebacker with Muasau. So what did you think of this pick?
It's an interesting one, Patty. And once again, we come back to special teams, with a pick this late in the draft. And we come back to connections between the Giants and a player. This is a guy who played for the University of Hawaii and was, as a freshman at Hawaii, was purely a special teams player. And Michael Gabriel, who is now the Giants special teams coordinator, was his special teams coach. And he was special teams MVP for Hawaii. So that when this kid's name came up, that he had an advocate, in the room, as far as somebody kind of banging the table for him. And the only reason why I downgrade this pick at all, it's nothing against the kid. I don't know the kid. He wasn't on my radar. I didn't watch this kid at all in the lead up to the draft. And the little bit that I've seen since the Giants picked him the other day, he's got some skills. He makes some plays. He can navigate some trash in the, along the line of scrimmage, and he looks like he's got some potential. But I come back to what they didn't do. What they didn't do that I thought was probably a bigger priority was add some depth on the edge. Add some depth. And for me, the biggest hole in this draft, the biggest hole in this draft, if you want to go beyond the quarterback discussion, who plays next to Dexter Lawrence? Who plays next to Dexter? All right. For me, I don't remember who was on the board at that point in time, but and again, you're talking about a 6th round pick, and you've got young guys. You've got Jordan Riley. You've got DJ Davidson, who are maybes. You've got Raheem Nunez Roches, who's an adequate veteran player. But the Giants traded away Leonard Williams in the middle of last season. They lost Ashawn Robinson, who wasn't a big pass rush guy, but he was a presence in the middle in run defense and had a pretty good year for the Giants. They lost him in free agency this offseason. So there's a hole there. So for me, to me, you downgrade this pick because I'm not sure where he fits. So a little bit like Phillips. And 2 years from now, we might find out that he's a better player than Micah McFadden. I've seen guys say that. I've seen some analysts say this kid will be starting in the NFL before his rookie contract is over with. And if that's the case, then it's a fantastic pick. And this is the silliness of grading these kids when we really don't know these kids and all of that. But right now, I look at that pick and I'm like, it would have made more sense to me to fill an edge spot or get some help for Dexter on the defensive line or draft a kid who could be a developmental swing tackle who might be able to play right tackle in 2025 if they need him, if they need a guy to do that. But so for me, that's why it's probably a C plus. And like I said, grading that as a C or C plus, maybe I look like an idiot 2 years from now when he's a starter next to Bobby Okereke. I don't know.
Well, I mean, nobody can predict the future, but as far as fits goes and all that stuff, that's what this is all about. And all things considered, Ed, I think he did a pretty good job breaking down all the fits and stuff like that. So I don't know about anybody else out there, but I'm going to give Professor Ed Valentine an A for his effort today.
I tried, but Patty, I still want to know, what does the hat get? Yeah, that's actually, exactly right.
Doting myself, we used to have a grade of E back in the day, way back before they went to F. So we used to say E was for effort. So maybe I'll give you an E.
All right, then.
E for effort.
All right.
So anyway, Giant fans, that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here. Thanks to Ed Valentine. Make sure you check out Big Blue View where he's doing his thing over there. And I, of course, am going to be on his show as well. So I'm sure he's gonna torture me with some kind of some ribbing and whatnot, because this is what we do, guys. So anyway, thank you for tuning in, Giant fans. Don't forget, I'm going to have the college hosts starting to appear on the show. We're going to get their take on the individual draft picks. So I'm in the process of getting that scheduled, and we'll get those shows out to you just as soon as humanly possible. For Ed Valentine, I'm Patricia Traina. See you tomorrow, Giant fans.